Hello learners, I am looking at activity 2 of the French Revolution based on the social causes. I'd like you to refer to this activity please. It is on page 5 of your resource pack, the first resource pack. We have already discussed this lesson. We will now look at the answers. The activity states, refer to source A and B and the notes on the social causes of the French Revolution and answer the questions set. The first one says, what did the bourgeoisie want? So if we look at the source on page 2 of your addendum, the source does tell us that as a class, the bourgeoisie, who you will recall were the middle class, had a lot of wealth because they were merchants. In other words, they were traders. They were manufacturers, bankers, doctors, lawyers, intellectuals. But they also tell us that they were very frustrated because although they had wealth, they had no status. In other words, they belonged to the third estate and they were not recognized in the second or the first estate despite being highly educated and extremely wealthy. So their desire was to rise in the ranks so that they could become members of the second estate, which were the nobility, or the first estate, which were the clergy. A handful of them, or a small percentage, had managed to buy their way into the upper estates. Now you need to understand that at the time, position in society, depending on which class you came from, was very, very important to people. So to these middle class people, it was an irritation and a frustration that they could not rise to the ranks of the first or second estates. So when they ask you the question, what did the bourgeoisie or middle class want? Your answer there should be, the bourgeoisie were highly frustrated because they had the wealth and the ability to be members of the highest classes of society. However, they were prevented from having status of being part of the first or second estate because they had been born into the third estate. So you focus on the fact that they had the education, they had the ability, they had the wealth to be part of the first two estates, but they were prevented from doing so because they had been born into the third estate. 2.2, why according to source A did the bourgeoisie class feel frustrated? I've already given you that answer, but we'll repeat it here. They were frustrated because they had the wealth which they had accumulated because of their hard work, but they could not attain the status. Status means the position and recognition of being in the first two estates. I'd now like you to move on to source B. The first question asks you to explain the term ancien regime. Remember, the pronunciation is ancien. It's a French pronunciation, regime. Ancien means ancient or old. Regime means a type of rule, the government or the leadership in power at the time. So explain the term ancien regime. Ancien regime refers to the monarchical rule that existed in France before the revolution broke out. The monarchical regime or system of rule that existed in France before the revolution broke out in 1789. This question asks you, why do you think did the bourgeoisie want to become landowners? Now here you look, although they tell you to refer to source B, you can also look at source A. The answer here relates more so to your notes than source B itself, but you can bring in parts of source B where you refer to the fact that those who belong to the third estate were considered to be enchained. Enchained means that they were oppressed, they were prevented from being free, and those who were landowners were considered the free class. So that could be one of your answers, but the more relevant answer would be land ownership was associated with the nobility who were able to impose taxes on those who lived on their land. It made them wealthy and it gave them status. So land ownership was associated with both wealth and status. 2.5. Which members of the third estate were most oppressed? This answer would refer to the peasants, P-E-A-S-A-N-T-S. List 4 challenges that the third estate faced. Here you will look at your notes, and your notes tell you that the third estate was the group that faced a lack of freedom, and they were the group that were denied opportunities. So we look at specifics now. And firstly, you will look at on page 4 of your resource pack. Refer specifically to the group that you want to discuss. The middle class, you can repeat here. They were denied positions and status in the first 2 estates. The working class, they were overworked and underpaid in the cities, in the factories. But it was the peasants who were most oppressed and who were most frustrated. Now here you can list any 4 grievances that they had, which would refer to their frustration and their annoyance with the first 2 estates. Talk about the taxes that they paid. There's a series of taxes. You can list any 4 of these. They talk about the taille, T-A-I-L-L-E. That was the direct tax paid to the government for the land on which they owned. The corvée, where they performed labor or work without getting paid. The gabelle, a salt tax paid to the government. Then the feudal dues paid to the landlord on whose land they lived for the use of roads, the mill, the winepress, and slaughterhouse. They also paid a rental to the landlord. They gave a portion of whatever they produced to the landlord. And then, of course, we spoke previously about the corvée as well. So any 4 of these would have been suitable. But if you take it in addition to the working class and the middle class, you could have one of about 7 or 8 answers. Okay, for the next question, we're going back to source B, and they asked you to extract 3 words from the source to show that the third estate were not free. So from this here, you should be able to deduce that the words that indicate that they were not free were the words enchained, the word oppressed, and you can also include the word shackled. So the 3 words are enchained, shackled, and oppressed. The next question, how, according to the author, would the third estate benefit if there were no privileged classes in France? This is reference to the fact that the third estate do not have rights and freedoms. The answer here, the third estate were denied the same opportunities as the first 2 estates. They were not equal in status, nor did they have the rights and freedoms that the nobility and the clergy had. Therefore, if there was no privileged class, the third estate would be given the opportunity to share in whatever opportunities, would be given the opportunity, I beg your pardon, to share in the rights and freedoms that were enjoyed by the upper classes. That brings an end to activity 2.